So hello guys, welcome to the channel. So every time you hit a send on WhatsApp, a miracle of engineering happens in under 100 milliseconds. We are talking about a system that manages over 100 billion messages a day and maintains billions of concurrent connections and ensures your data stays private with end-to-end encryptions. So this is nothing but WhatsApp. Here, it is a messaging service which we use it daily, which allows users to send and receive encrypted messages from phones and computers. So, if you have ever opened the network tab of WhatsApp or any WhatsApp web client, you would see some WebSockets being used, some visible traffic over there. So this isn't just a magic, it is high level system design of WhatsApp. In this video, we aren't just going to draw boxes on a whiteboard. I am going to show you the exact invisible infrastructure behind such systems. We are even going to jump into the Slack dev tools later in the video to see this exact concepts like heartbeats, pings, pub/sub executing in real time. By the end of this video, you won't just understand WhatsApp, you will be able to build any kind of massive scale real time chat system on your own. Now, before we deep dive into the exact concepts like code or the database sharding or whatever we need for this real-time system, we use what I call it as a delivery framework. Now, this isn't just a list, it's a mental model for solving complex problems. If you jump straight into the how, you will get lost. You have to start with why and then what. So here is our roadmap for today. So initially I'll start with the requirement gathering, where we split this into functional and non-functional requirement, where functional requirement tells us what the user sees and non-functional requirement is how the system survives under pressure. The second thing which we talk about is core entities. Here we define the nouns of our system, what is chat, what is a participant, and everything. The fourth thing over here is API and interface design. This is where we define the verbs. How do we actually send or create anything into our WebSockets, or for that matter in the whole system? The fifth thing which I see over here, and also we combine that with the sixth one, which is HLD and data flow, where we map out the journey of a message from sender A to a recipient B. Then we, at the end, we go towards the deep dives. This is senior engineers territory. We all talk about the consistent hashing, Redis, PubSub, and many other things. But how those things actually work in this real-time system is what we are going to see in the deep dives at the end. So now let's get into the specifics. In a system design interview, the first 5 minutes define your level. If you don't define your requirements, you aren't an architect, you are just a coder. So let's break down the functional requirements first. So talking about the functional requirements here, the first thing which comes to our mind is users should be able to start a individual or a group chat with multiple participants. So here I have set a limit of 100 participants. This is because in the world of high skill, every extra user adds exponential complexity. And to fan out this process, it is going to be very complex. So 100 is our sweet spot for our performance. That's why I have kept it 100. But yeah, we'll discuss more on this functional requirement later in the later part of the video. The second functional requirement is a basic send and receive, I would say, because if that is not there, then your WhatsApp is of no use. But behind this send button, whenever you send anything or receive anything, there is a massive state machine that tracks if a message is sent, delivered, or read. So we'll all look at this ticks later. The third part is offline delivery. Now, if a user is off the grid for let's say 20 to 30 days, the system acts as a temporary vault. So we aren't just a pipe, we are a durable buffer, I would say. This changes how we think about the database's time to live and how our system is going to, keep the messages of the user and get all the messages once the user is online. So this completes our third functional requirement as well. So now if you talk about the fourth functional requirement, in this real world, we don't just have text. we need to handle high resolution images and videos. But we don't really send the binary data of this text and videos to a WebSocket, which we are going to essentially use in the later part of the video. So we'll use an object store like S3 and like just pass the metadata. We'll all talk about this function requirement more in the later part of the video. It's just that now the user should be able to send and receive media files as well and not just text. So that's why we declare this in our functional requirements. Now we will talk about the non-functional requirements. So here we need low latency, where in a global system, the speed isn't a luxury, it is a product. So if a message takes 2 seconds, the conversation feels dead. So we'll all solve this with the edge locations and geosharding and all everything we will be using, and we'll try to bring the latency as low as possible. So this completes our first non-functional requirement. The second one is a guaranteed delivery. So in distributed systems, networks fail constantly. So our architecture must be fault tolerant and use acknowledgements to ensure that we aren't missing anything. So this is our second non-functional requirement. The third one, which we are going to talk about, is high throughput. So handling, let's say, 1 lakh writes per second. It isn't just about fast CPU; it's about horizontal scalability as well. So we need a system that can grow by just adding more bricks to the wall. Now, coming to the fourth non-functional requirement is, and it is also our core design principle, where we don't just store messages on the server unless it is very necessary. So once a message is delivered and acknowledged, it should be white, and it is also better for the privacy of the users, and it also keeps our storage costs very low, and it keeps our cost in control, I would say. Talking about the fifth functional requirement, and which we have already talked about in the second one, is like being fault tolerant. So we'll take some extra steps to keep our system fault tolerant, and we'll discuss more on this in our deep dives. So now that we know the what and how, let's talk about the who. So in system design, we call this core entities. Now, these are persistent objects that live in our database. So if you get these tables wrong, the whole system collapses under its own weight. So let's keep it trivial and look at the four pillars. So first one is the user. So here, a user isn't just a name, it's a primary key. We need to store basic profile data, but more importantly, we need to track their online status. Are they reachable right now? And that is why it is $1 billion question about it. So user is our first core entity. The second thing is a chat. So a chat is a logical container. It binds two or more users together. So whether it's a one-on-one secret conversation or a 100-person group. So it all lives under a single chat ID. So this is our anchor for grouping messages. The third thing is message. This is the heart of the system. Every message has a payload, a timestamp, and a status. But here is a senior tip. We don't just store the text, we store the metadata as well. So we need to know who sent it, which chat it belongs to, and its current life cycle state, like it is sent, delivered, or read. So this is about message. The fourth thing is a client. So a single user can have multiple clients, a phone, a tablet, or a laptop. So we need to treat clients as first class citizens. So if you read a message on your phone, your laptop needs to know. Managing the sync across different client IDs is what makes the chat app feel seamless. So these are all our core entities. So now let's talk about how the client and server actually speak to each other. In a typical app like Instagram or Amazon, you use REST APIs. The client asks a question and the server gives an answer. But for a chat app, that's too slow. So if I have to wait for my phone to poll the server every few seconds to see if I have a message, it drains my battery and feels laggy. So we need something which is faster, and that is why we need WebSockets. Now, think of REST APIs like a phone call. You dial, you talk, you hung up. And a WebSocket is like a walkie-talkie channel that stays open for 24 by 7, I would say. So once you open the app, you establish a bidirectional socket connection with a server. Now it's persistent pipe, and the server doesn't wait for you to ask for messages. It just pushes them through the pipe at any moment they arrive. So because of this, our API isn't a list of URL, it's list of JSON commands being sent back and forth over the single open pipe. So generally in other system design videos, if you would have seen in this API system interface, we design the API endpoints basically, where we will be having a request model, we'll be having a response model. But here, as we will be having the communication through WebSockets, where whenever a client comes, or let's say whenever you log in, the moment you log in, your client tries to have a connection with the server which is of a type socket. So that will be a WebSocket connection, and then we'll be also deciding upon the commands which will be sending through that pipe. So here we have 6 basic commands for us, which is create chat, send message, then we have create attachment, then we have modify chat participants, we have chat update, and we have new message. So these are all 6 commands which are going to flow through our pipe or the WebSocket connection. So the first one is create chat. This is the start of our journey. The client sends the list of participants and the name of that particular chat, and it's now the JSON which we have kept for this is very simple. So it is very clean and effective over here, because we are just giving the participants and the name of the chat, and in the return we will be getting a chat ID as a response. The second thing is a send message. So here also, so whenever you send a message, right, so you need to tell in the pipe that for which chat basically you are sending that message, and then once you mention the chat ID of that, you also give the exact message what you are trying to send, to anyone. And the third one is any attachments if you want to attach. So as we also discussed in our functional requirements, that we will be having all types of media, in particularly like photos and videos being sent through our chat system. So that is why we'll be having attachments field as well. So in return we will be getting a status success or failure, and in return, as we got chat ID earlier, now we'll be getting a message ID as well once you submit the message or send the message via the pipe to the server. Now the third thing is create an attachment. So this is just a simple, I would say, a simple command. So before attaching any attachment over here, if you see over here, we will need to execute this command where we create the attachment, we give the body, we give the hash, in return we get the attachment ID. The same attachment ID is sent over in this array. So this is just a command to create the attachment. The fourth command is also very useful. So we usually remove some members to our groups, or if you add some members to the chat. So here we have the chat ID in our JSON, in our command JSON basically, where we'll mention the chat ID, the user ID which we want to add and or remove. Let's say it will be mostly defined by the operations which we mention over here, and at the end we'll get a success or failure flag based on this chat. So now when a chat is created or updated, we have parallel commands to that when the server is going to send something to the client. So all these 4 commands which we discussed right now are all about client sending something to the server. Now there are some commands which server will be sending to the client. So imagine you sending a message to some person. So firstly you will use this send message command over here to the chat server, and then chat server somehow gets to know that you have to send it to that person. So here only the chat the chat server will use this new message command over here which we see. So this new message command we will be sending from server to the client, or any like the person whom we are trying to send the message. So basically here we'll be sending the chat ID, user ID, message, and the attachments if it is there, and in return we'll be getting received or success or failure flag as well. So again, the one more command which we should discuss is about chat update. So this is nothing but if we want to propagate the changes from server to the client, right? Let's say you update some, let's say you are the admin and somehow you remove some members from your group. Now you have sent this modify chat command via the pipe to the server. Now the server needs to tell all the clients which are in the group, right? So in a group there would be 50 members, and you are the admin, you remove one of the member from the group. So you use the modify chat participant command. Now it's the server's responsibility now to send a chat update to all the connections, or all members of the group with a chat update command, so that that is also updated at their local system. So here we just have the chat ID and the updated participants list. Now at the end we get acknowledgement if it's received or not. So that's about it. So here if you see, I have opened one more chat system, which is Slack. So I will just refresh this page and we'll just have a look at the network tab over here. So here, once the page loads, here we can see all the network calls happening for this page. If I just filter for socket, so here whatever we discussed, right? So whenever we open this client, so this I am the user one over here. So here whenever I open my account, so here this particular interface or the client tries to connect to a server via WebSocket. So when I just sorted this or filtered this using this socket connection, I am able to see this particular socket over here. So if I click on this, sorry, so if I click on this and I move on to the messages, so these are the messages getting exchanged with the server which we have connected to. So it would have connected to a chat server once I opened the app. As I refresh the page, you can see that this was a socket and it has connected to a server. Now it is exchanging some messages. So if you see that we defined some particular 5 to 6 commands in the API or interface design, which I just talked about. So here, these are some heartbeat, uh, you know, messages which are exchanged with the server. So if you see here, it is just a normal JSON. But the main thing which I wanted to show to you over here is, so let's say whenever if at all I create one more chat, let's say I create one more group, let's say the name is sample. Okay. So when I open this sample over here, okay, sample, let's say it is sample 123, and I try to create this group. Now if you see over here, again a message would be sent to the chat server, and you can see that there are some series of messages which are sent, and obviously it won't be as simple as what we discussed in our API interface, but there are some messages which I'll try to open. So over here we see that sample 123 chat is created over here, and we can start inviting the users. So if you see over here, this was the first message. So if you see over here, this is channel created message being sent to the chat server, and here it is channel true, is group false, and all other parameters whatever you are able to see are over here. So the second thing also is like there are some 2 to 3 events which are getting created. So firstly, the channel creation is there. The second message is the pref change. The third is channel join. So the basically when we created the channel, after that we were made to join this sample 123 channel. So you can see over here, this is the ID of the channel, or the chat ID I would say, and the name of the chat and all other parameters also. Again, we are also able to see the member joined event as well, or member joined command as well. So this is our user ID. So basically, once we created the group, we joined to the group, and we can see that this user has joined. So that is why we have sent this command over this WebSocket as well. So here there are multiple commands being sent about the permissions, about the messages and all. So every command, whatever we just discussed right now, is being used over here. Obviously it would have like many other parameters, as it is a production scale system. In our case it's a simple system, that's why we had very simple commands. But what essentially I wanted to show you guys over here is how the messages are exchanged via WebSocket, and other things which you see over here are all about the heartbeat, so that the server knows that the client is online. So in this way we always try to inform the client that we are there. So if you see over here, the up arrow basically tells us that this is sent by the server to us. This is ping, and our client responds with pong, basically, which is through down arrow. So this is all is everything over here. So even if I try to send a message, you would see a message event also being sent over here. So see how nicely we can see over here that we have got the message command as well, which was flown through the WebSocket to the server. So if you see over here, I have sent message hi. So this was the text with my hi message, and this was sent to the server. So that's all about the commands which I discussed right now. So here it is a complex grid system, but at our end we tried to simplify this commands into some six commands, and I have tried to make it simple for you guys. And let's now jump into the main things about how we will be solving one-to-one functional requirements. So this is a very new thing because we usually have REST APIs, but with WebSocket connections, how the things happen, how things are actually happening is what I wanted to tell you guys. Yeah, so let's move past the theory and start building now. So this is our high level design now. So here, when we talk about our first functional requirement where we wanted to create group chats with multiple participants, and one on, as I also told that one on one chat is a special case of a group chat, I would say, where we'll just have two members. So that is also a chat. So what happens when we want to actually create a group chat? So here if you see, we have a client where it connects to a chat server via a load balancer, where load balancer, because we would have multiple chat servers in our case, so load balancer would redirect our request to one of the chat server, and now our client would be connected to that particular chat server via a WebSocket. So now what happens is, let's say we have two users. These two users, I will be taking the reference throughout the whole video. So let's say we have two users. One user is Athar, the second user is Bob. Okay, so now user Atharv, let's say, connects to a service, connects to our basically the chat server, and he sends a create chat message over there. Now once he sends this create chat message over the WebSocket connection, the service creates a chat record over here, which you can see over here. So this is a chat, basically chat table, where we will be having the name of the chat which Atharv has given. So let's say this is system design prep, which is the name of the chat given by Atharv. So which is populated, and along with this chat record which we have created over here, we will be having entries in the chat participant table as well. So we'll be adding, and also we have a limit of 100, right? We have already mentioned in our functional requirement that we'll be having a limit of 100 participants at max in a particular chat. So here we can see that immediately in chat participant table, we take the same chat ID which was returned when we created the chat, which is ch underscore 99. And for the chat ID, we have got user Athar, which is the participant ID. And basically join data and role are these two kind of metadata for that particular user. We will have, so let's say after some time, Bob also joins that chat, or maybe Athar invites Bob, and once the invitation is sent to Bob and Bob accepts it, we will have one more entry in the chat participant table for Bob. So here we will be having same chat ID ch underscore 99, where we'll be having user Bob as the participant, and it is his ID. This is join and role as well. So here we can see that whenever we create a chat, whenever we send this create chat message, we have two records getting populated in two tables. Firstly, we have the name of that particular chat which is submitted by the user in the create chat message, because if you remember in create chat I was asking the name as well to be supplied whenever we want to create the chat. So that same name is populated in the table, and this is the metadata which we calculate and just put it in their table. Then the next thing which happens over here is we have created the record in chat participant table as well. So now if you notice over here, we have used DynamoDB. So because at scale traditional relational joins are a performance suicide mission, we need a NoSQL approach where we can fetch the data in a single hop. We are going to write to two tables simultaneously, as we discussed: the chat table which stores the group name and the created at metadata, and the chat participant table which maps every user to that chat, right? So if we look at the participant table, chat participant table, we are using the chat ID as partition key over here, and participant ID, which you see over here, as sort key over here, so which is SK. So this is a classic one-to-many relationship design. It allows system to instantly pull a list of everyone in, let's say, ch underscore 99 channel without scanning the rest of the database. So it is localized, it's fast, And because we capped our groups at 100 people, this query will always be lightning fast, regardless of how many billions of users we have, right? And then the next thing which I would like to talk about is, what if Atharv opens his app and needs to see all the groups he belongs to? So if we only have the chat ID as partition key, which you can see over here, uh, we would have searched every single row in the database, and that's a full table scan, and it's an expensive mistake. So to solve this, we will be having a GSI as well. So GSI is nothing but global secondary index. We essentially tell DynamoDB to maintain a shadow copy of the table where the keys are flipped. So in the GSI, the participant ID becomes the basically the partition key, and now when Atharv logs in, we can fetch the entire chat list in one tiny cheap query. So we have turned a massive scaling bottleneck into a trivial order of one lookup. So once the DB confirms this right, the server sends the chat ID back to Atharv, and the group is officially live. But the group is just a ghost town until people start talking. So how do we actually handle this 40k messages per second that follow? So that's where things will get really interesting, and we will discuss more in the later part of the video. So now that you have understood that in case of GSI, we will be having this two keys flipped, which is chat ID and participant ID. And basically the participant ID here, as I mentioned, that it becomes the primary key of the table. So basically in DynamoDB, though this global secondary index is expensive, we can use it for faster. So basically it's a trade-off with cost and the order of, the time complexity with which we can fetch the data. Right. So now let's move to the second functional requirement. Now that we have our groups set up, let's get to the core of any messaging app, that is sending and receiving messages. Okay. So to understand how the pros do it, we first have to look at the naive approach. So to keep things trivial for a moment, let's assume a world where we only have one single chat server for everyone. It's a terrible solution for production, but it's a perfect way to visualize the logic. In this scenario, every user opens a WebSocket connection to only one host. So inside the server's RAM, we maintain a simple in-memory hash map that basically says that, let's say, user 101 is connected to socket A, and let's say user 102 is using a socket B. Okay, so now let's say, as I already talked, that we will be considering two users throughout our video, which is Atharv and Bob. And let's say Bob wants to send a message. Okay, so whenever Bob wants to send a message, he will try to use this send message command. Okay, and it will send that to the chat server via the WebSocket connection. So if you see the send message command which we have designed, where we will be mentioning the chat ID. So in this case, Bob has to mention the chat ID where Atharv is there with him, and after that he needs to put his message, and then if he has any attachment, he will send that attachment through this command. So once this particular thing is ready with Bob sends this through the WebSocket. So if you see over here, the once this thing comes, like let's say his phone sends, Bob's phone sends a send message command over the WebSocket to a chat server, the server receives it and it immediately looks up the group in our database to find all chat participants. So it sees that Atharv is there in that particular chat for that chat ID which Bob has mentioned. So if you see over here, Bob would have, this is the channel which is ch_99 for both of them. So here it would search for all the users. So because Bob has sent the message to Atharv, we will get Atharv as one of the user in this ch_99. So what we will do is we'll get all the participants. So user Bob is the participant who has sent the message. We will try to find other users who are there. So user Atharv is one of the user in that chat which Bob would have sent a message into. Okay, so now here what we do is chat server looks up all the chat participants for that chat, which I have already explained to you. The third thing which we do is chat server looks for the WebSocket connections for each participant in its internal hash table. And because Atharv would have connected to that chat server, we would have got Atharv's socket also in the hash map, because we would have mapped Atharv's user ID, which is user underscore Atharv, towards socket connection, which via which Atharv would have connected to the chat server. Okay, so once we got the WebSocket, we would have simply used this new message, basically, which if you see over here, which is this new message command, we would have sent to Atharv via the server. Okay, so as I told you that these two things are the ones which are sent via server, okay, to the client. So this new message would be sent to new message command would be sent to via populating, like we'll be using our tables to populate this all fields, and we'll be sending it to Other, and that's how that message which was sent by Bob would be we would be able to see that in Athar's chat interface. Okay, so this is how we have made a system where we are able to send and receive messages. Okay, but here I see there are two massive assumptions which we are making. The first one is we assume that everyone is online at the same time, and in the real world people go to sleep, lose signal, or turn off their phones. So if a user isn't in that hash map right at that second, the message just vanishes into thin air. So imagine if Athar would have not been connected to the chat server at that time when Bob would have sent a message, that message would have vanished. That's what I wanted to tell you over here. The second massive assumption which we did, and which might create a problem, is that in a system with, as we said, that we'll be having around 2 billion users, you don't have one server, because you will have thousands of servers, not just one. And if Bob is on server A, let's say, and Athar is connected, even if let's say Athar is online, he would, let's say, be connected to server Z. Then how does server A talk to server Z then? Right? That also would be a problem, because Bob is connected to server A, and if you send Bob sends a message to server A, and then server A searches in its RAM that is there any connection. So though Athar is online, though Athar is connected to our system, but he is connected to some other server, let's say server Z. And now server A, where Bob is connected, and server Z need to communicate within themselves to send that message to Athar's UI. So this is one of the assumptions we just made, and we'll try to solve this both of the assumptions. The first one is where we are considering everyone is online, and the second one where we are thinking that everyone is connected to the same server, which will not be the case when we will have such big systems in production, right? So we'll try to discuss this in the deep dives, like how we'll solve this particular problem. Alright, so if you have been following along, you will notice our system is evolving. We started with a simple noun, the user, then we added verbs, the WebSocket commands, then we built a HLD for starting chats. But now we hit a wall. In our previous design, if you weren't online at exact millisecond a message was sent, that message was lost forever. And that's not WhatsApp, or for that matter any chat system which we see. So that's a broken app. To fix this, we need to introduce two new physical tables into our DynamoDB, the message table and the inbox table. So these are the two tables which I have mentioned, and these are the attributes within them, which is ID, chat ID, contents, and creator ID for message, and for inbox we have recipient ID and message ID. So now, if you look at these two tables, this the message table is our permanent log table basically, where, as I already told you, that it has the ID of that message, the chat ID in which that message is going to be there, the content which is the actual message, and the creator of that message. So this is the ID of Bob, who sent the message to Athar. So the content was, let's say, the hey Athar. So that was the message which was stored in the message table as a permanent log. Again, we have one more table, which is the inbox table. So this is a temporary buffer. It's a slim table with just two columns, recipient ID and message ID. So think of this it as a to-do list for a server. It only stores messages that haven't been delivered yet. Okay, so let's walk through a story so that you understand what happens and how do we use these two tables. Okay, so initially what we can see that the chat, let's say Bob sends a message to Athar. Okay, and let's say Athar's phone is off. In our case, as we said, that maybe some other clients or whoever is the receiver of the message is off for some reason, then how are we going to deal with this issue, right? So first the chat server receives Bob's message and immediately writes it to the message table, which you can see over here. Okay, so Bob sent a "Hey Athar" message to Athar, and it has immediately returned that message into the message table. Now, secondly, what happens is that the server sees Athar is a participant of that chat, and it writes a row into the inbox table for user Athar as well. Okay, so this thing happens over here where if you check for the user Athar, okay, so we write that same thing into the inbox table as well. So now for user Athar, who is the recipient of that message, along with the message ID, we also write that into the inbox table. Okay, so now that we have two entries in two tables, the first one is the message table and the second one is the inbox table. Okay, now what happens is the server checks if Athar's WebSocket is open or not. So if yes, the server pushes that message, and Athar's app sends an acknowledgement, and server deletes that row from the inbox table. So if Athar is online, this row would be deleted. Okay, and we will have nothing for in within inbox of Athar, which is perfectly fine. But let's say Athar is not online, which is no's case. Okay, so server does nothing and row stays in the inbox over here only. So whenever Athar comes online, this we first check for the WebSocket if there is anything, if any message, if there are like n messages which are receivable for Athar, we will just directly take it from the inbox. And once we have flushed that thing into the UI or wherever, like we have received it and otherwise send an acknowledgement to the server, we will immediately delete that entry from inbox. So we will have a permanent entry in the message log, which is perfectly fine, but in the inbox it is a temporary table, as we have already told that it's a temporary buffer. So whenever the client comes up online, we will just flush it off, and this is how we solve that particular problem. Okay, so that's what we have actually told here. When Athar tries to reconnect, let's say after 3 hours, Athar turns his phone on and opens the app. Athar establishes a WebSocket connection with the chat server, and then server queries for the inbox table. So in the inbox table, basically, as I told, that will be querying for the recipient ID, which is user Athar, who just came online. Okay, so here in our case it finds a message 001 in the inbox table, as you can see over here, and then server goes through the message table and gets the actual text, which is "Hey Athar," and then Athar's phone sends an acknowledgement back once you have sent that message to his client. Okay, and the server deletes that message. So at the end, if acknowledgement is received at the server end, the server will delete that message 001 record from the inbox, and that is how we deal this particular situation where clients may not be online when anyone is sending a message. Okay, so here in this case, server doesn't panic and it doesn't retry, it just stops, and the message is sitting safely in the inbox if the particular client is not available, and once it comes up, we will just flush it off. So now let's look at the fourth functional requirement, where users should be able to send or receive media in their messages. So when we say that text is easy because it's few bytes, but the moment a user hits send on a 4K video or a high resolution image, your system enters a danger zone. So if you try to send that entire file through a WebSocket, you are going to block the pipe, and no other message can get through while that video is uploading, and your chat server will get choked and based on the memory usage which a video upload or a high resolution image might take. So to build a WhatsApp scale or any, let's say, a higher level chat system, we need a hands-off approach for media. We want the client to talk to the storage directly so that our chat server can stay focused on what it does best, that is routing the messages. So here is one ideal approach. So what we do is over here, that instead of sending the file to the chat server, the client sends a small lightweight command, which is, let's say, get attachment target. Okay, so we have already discussed a lot of commands which we would send through WebSocket. So this would be one of the command which would actually do is which will what it will do is actually it will generate a pre-signed URL for a blob storage service, like let's say Amazon S3 or let's say Google Cloud Storage. And you can think of this URL as a temporary VIP pass that allows the user's phone to upload that specific file directly to our storage buckets for a limited amount of time, let's say 5 minutes or something like that. Based on that, basically this command will let us get the pre-signed URL from the server actually. So once we get this pre-signed URL, which is just a VIP pass for our S3 bucket, client can directly upload to that uh, bucket storage instead of directly contacting our chat server. And once the upload is finished, the client gets the simple URL for that attachment. It then sends the standard text message over the WebSocket that says, hey, I have sent a video and here is the link. Okay, so now when the recipient gets the message, their phone doesn't automatically download the heavy video, it just shows a tiny preview. So only when the user clicks download does and then what their client does is it queries the blob storage directly using that URL which they would have got after uploading it. And now our chat server is never even touched for the actual bytes of the video. It only handles the tiny metadata string. This is how you will keep a system responsive even when millions of people are sharing heavy media at the exact same time. So if you see over here in our high level diagram, so here we have a client and here we have a chat server. So as I said that we'll be introducing one get attachment target command. This command will actually will be sent to the chat server so that we get the URL, and once we get back the URL here to the client, it will directly upload to the blob storage. It will not involve the chat server in general, so that our chat server is free for the client messages which it is going to send. So what are the commands which we had, we'll be sending those only through the WebSocket. And this way actually we have solved the problem of sending let's say bigger videos, or let's say which take more memory and more storage. Okay, and here is one thing also which we need to take care over here is about the storage cost. So because we are a messaging service and not a permanent cloud drive, a great optimization here is to set a lifecycle policy as well. Once the system detects that every recipient in the chat has successfully downloaded the media, we can find a way to expire or archive the data from the blob storage. So it keeps our infrastructure lean and our costs low. Yeah. So now that if you have made it this far, you have built a functional chat app. But in a real interview for a senior role, this is where the real exam begins. We need to move into the deep dives. And the first deep dive which we will discuss is how can we handle billions of simultaneous users. So for that, let's look at the math. Now at WhatsApp, it handles around 1 billion daily active users, and at any peak moment about 200 million of them are connected to a server. Okay, so now a high performance chat server can handle maybe 1 or 2 million WebSocket connections before it runs out of RAM or file descriptors. To support the whole world, we don't need just one server, we need a fleet of thousands. And to scale, we can't add just more servers, because as soon as you have more than one server, your internal memory becomes a silo. And here is where we come on to the famous problem, which is the lost message problems. So now that anyone says that if you want to scale, or if you want to handle billions of simultaneous users, and let's say the answer is just add servers, and but if you add like a lot of servers, this is the problem, which is the lost message problem, which I'm going to explain you right now will occur. And let's see what it is exactly. So even after adding servers, we are having some problem which we will discuss now. Okay, so firstly, if you see at this particular diagram here, Athar logs in. Okay, and the load balancer assigns him to the server 3. Okay, now his phone holds a persistent WebSocket connection over here with the server 3. Okay, and now after some time Bob comes up and Bob tries to connect to our chat servers. So while load balancer assigns him to server 1, which you can see in the diagram. Okay, now Bob tries to send a message. Let's say it is hello Athar. Now Bob tries to send a hello Athar message to Athar. Okay, so that message hits, because Bob is connected to server 1, that message will obviously hit to the server 1, because in that WebSocket connection which Bob has established with chat server 1, In that he will use the send message command, which we have already discussed in the API interface, and in that he will like mention his message, whatever he wants to send. Then what we do is, as we have already discussed in our functional requirements, that we will be having entries into our message table as well as inbox table. These things will work as usual, okay, because database is a there's a single component where every chat servers would actually put their data. So here chat server 1 will put the data into the inbox table as well as the message table. Okay, now if we see, if we can see properly, there is a problem, because here server 1 tries to deliver the message whatever is there to Athar, right, because Bob has sent to Athar, but it looks at its own hash map, because in every server we will be having a map, and that map would have a user id slash socket key value pair. So for every user id we'll be having a socket connection. Now at server 1, because since Athar was connected to server 3, in server 3's hash map there would be a map where Athar's user id, which is user underscore Athar, and the socket connection would be there. But Bob has sent message to server 1 because he is connected to chat server 1, and then chat server 1 will try to see in its own RAM that in that map do we have a connection for user Athar, and it sees that there is no connection actually, because Athar was connected to server 3, which is going to be a problem, and it just searches for that, and basically the server says no, I don't have any connection for Athar, and server 1 has no idea where Athar is sitting on. Okay, and it has no way to talk to other servers as well, because from Bob's side the message is sent, and from Athar's side he is online but he doesn't see anything, and that message is effectively lost. So this is a classic distributed systems failure. You would actually see it in many systems, and we have, and this is what we call as siloed state. So our servers are islands that don't know each other, and this is the problem now. So to fix this, we might need to have some common language or a service registry that knows where that every single user is parked. So we need to bridge the gap between server 1 and server 3 now. So here all these servers are not connected with each other, and that is creating a problem, and that is what making the message not reach Athar. And in the second part of how do we solve this, I'll be explaining that. So in the last part, we saw that the lost message about the lost message problem. So server 1 has a message for Athar, but Athar is connected to server 3. Server 1 looks in its own RAM, finds nothing, and the message dies. To bridge this gap, we need a central post office, something that every server can talk to. And here is where we will talk about Apache Kafka. So in this approach, we create a dedicated topic for every single user. Think of it like a personalized mailbox in the cloud. So here, if you see, for let's say every user, if I say, and we had like the case of Athar and Bob, so Athar would get a topic as user Athar, and Bob would have got a user topic as user Bob. Okay, so these are the two topics created for the users, two users which we have. So if we have 1 billion users, we will be having 1 billion topics. Okay, so now let's see how, again, when Bob tries to send message, what will happen. Okay, so when Athar logs into the server 3, because again the load balancer would have routed Athar to let's say server 3, the server immediately becomes a consumer. It starts watching the user Athar topic now. So when Athar has logged in to server 3, now server 3 knows that because Athar has a topic as user Athar, it immediately becomes a consumer of it. Okay, so this is the first thing what happens in this particular approach. Now Bob comes up. Okay, so Bob, who is on server 1, again his server 1, which is he got server 1 via load balancer, would have subscribed to Bob's topic as well, which is user Bob in our case, which I just mentioned. Okay, so now that is not important over here, because Bob would be sender of the message, but the server 1 would have been a consumer of Bob's topic as well. Okay, so now instead of server 1 looking in, and let's say Bob sends a message now. Okay, Bob sends, hey Athar, and now, so instead of server 1 looking in its own RAM, because we said that the server 1 will try to see in its own RAM, there is a connection, a map for Atharv. If it was not there in earlier case, that is why we were not able to deliver the message. But here we won't do that thing. Here we won't search in the RAM. What we would do is we will simply produce a message to the Kafka topic named user Atharv. So whenever Bob will try to send a message, okay, so it will directly publish it to Atharv's topic now, and Athar's topic is consumed by server 1, server 3, where Athar was connected, okay, where it is a consumer. So Kafka sees the new entry, and because now the server 3 is subscribed to that topic, it receives the data instantly. And then in its RAM, it will easily find Athar's socket because Athar is connected to server 3. In its local memory, it will find that Athar socket and it will immediately push that message to his phone. Now, if you see, we have solved that problem where servers are communicating with each other via Kafka basically. So on paper, this looks perfect, I would say, because here if you see and also if you see over here, the target was user Athar when Bob actually sent a message, and this was the thing which was published into the topic of user Athar. Okay, when Bob messaged something to Athar. Okay, so let's say the payload was, let's say, Bob from Bob. This was the text, hey Athar, and this was the timestamp just for metadata sake. Okay, so now as I already told that Kafka sees the new entry and the server 3 receives the data and it immediately sends it to Athar's WebSocket. Why it immediately sends that message to Athar's WebSocket connection, and now servers are properly talking with each other. But on paper, this looks perfect. It solves the routing problem completely. But if you suggest this in an interview for a billion user system, you are going to get a lot of tough follow up questions. Why? Because it's a overhead. Apache Kafka was not built to handle 1 billion individual topics. Every topic in Kafka carries a metadata weight of roughly 50 KB per topic. Okay, and if you multiply that with 1 billion users, which are our users for WhatsApp or any chat system for that matter, you're looking at 50 terabytes of overhead. Okay, and this is quite huge. This is a massive infrastructure nightmare and a huge waste of resources. So, and this is how our system is evolving now. But if you see, we found a solution that works for, let's say, 10k users, but we just proved it that it shatters at a billion. So we need something lighter. We need a way to route messages without creating a billion individual topics, and that is what we will see in the next approaches, apart from what we have discussed till now. So we just saw why Apache Kafka fails at billion users. The overhead of billion topics is just too much. We need a way for our servers to find each other without a middleman. We need a system where server 1 can look at user ID and calculate exactly where the user is sitting. To do that, we are going to use consistent hashing approach now. So the beauty of this approach is that it's completely deterministic. And let's see once again with the same scenario where Bob tries to send message to Athar. Okay, so now when Athar logs in, the load balancer runs a formula, which is, let's say, hash Athar. Okay, the result tells the load balancer to send Athar's WebSocket connection to server 3 over here. We have always taken server 3 connection for Athar just to keep the uniformity throughout the whole video so that you understand the use cases properly. Okay, so now again, as I said, that Athar logs in, the load balancer runs a formula, and the result tells that load balancer to send Athar's WebSocket connection to server 3. Okay, now Bob again tries to connect, it gets server 1 similarly through the same formula. Hash of Bob would have given it server 1. Now Bob tries to again send a message which is hey Athar, and he hits a send button. Okay, now we'll see what will happen. Server 1 doesn't look at the Kafka now. Okay, it doesn't look at the database also now. It simply runs the exact same formula, which is hash of Athar. Whatever the hash function we have, we pass the Athar's ID or whatever Athar's unique ID is. And again, server 1 would get to know that because the math is consistent, server 1 realizes immediately that wait, Athar must be on server 3 because the hash which would have ran on Athar's user ID, it would have immediately come to know that Athar is on server 3. Now, because server 1 knows through a deterministic way that it has to reach to server 3 and send the same thing to server 3 somehow, and then server 3 can send that message to Ather via the WebSocket connections, via the available WebSocket connections, I would say. Okay, so since now server 1 knows exactly where Ather is, it opens a direct high speed connection, like let's say gRPC, to server 3's internal IP address and sends the message over server 3. And then server 3 receives that RPC call, looks at its local RAM, finds Athar's socket, and pushes the message to his phone instantly. So we have eliminated the middleman essentially over here. And if you see over here in this diagram also, here we would have a chat registry where it will have all the things, all information about whatever the chat servers we have. Now client is connected to any of the chat server, let's say based on the load balancers and whatever the hash function gives for the user ID. And now that all servers are connected via a gRPC connection, that makes, and now also we have a deterministic way of finding where that user is, on which server it might be. Then it's easier for us to send anything, let's say via gRPC connection. We'll use any mode, let's say here in case we'll use gRPC, and it is fast also because gRPC connections are very fast compared to REST calls, and it is mostly used for inter-service communication. So now all the servers are connected properly, and we also know that where to send that message. Now once server 1 sends it to server 3, I mean Bob's server sends the message to Athar's server, that particular thing. Now we have a persistent WebSocket connection at server 3 of Ather, and we immediately send that message, and Ather receives that message. Now we have eliminated the middleman also of Kafka, and we have also reduced the whole overhead what Kafka added to our system. So this might feel like a ultimate win because no Kafka overhead, just pure math. But as every design choice is, there is a massive con also, and that can bite you at scale. So in this world, every single chat server needs to maintain a persistent connection with every other chat server, which you can see over here. So here I have 3 chat servers and everyone is connected with each other. So now what happens is that if you have, let's say, 1k servers, which is 1000 servers, based on our calculations also we thought that we would need around 500 to 600 servers, right? And let's say if you have 1000 servers, so each server is managing 999 internal connections, and if one server goes down, you try to scale up. The rebalancing and connection management becomes a maintenance nightmare over here, and it only works if your fleet stays relatively small. And that is why this has this biggest con, and we need to solve this. So we have seen till now the lost message problem, the Kafka overhead problem, and now the connection maintenance problem. So we are slowly narrowing down to how a real world title like WhatsApp actually does it. Okay, and that is what we will look in the final approach. Okay, now let's see the last approach, which is using Redis PubSub. Okay, so here we have seen Kafka fail on overhead and consistent hashing fail on maintenance. So how does a title like WhatsApp actually scale to billion? So they use a global user registry combined with a publish subscribe model of Redis. Instead of every server trying to guess where the user is, we use a centralized and lightning fast switchboard powered by Redis, which is Redis PubSub. So here is a winning play, and I have again drawn the flow for the same thing where Ather and Bob communicate with each other, and Bob sends a message to Ather, and let's see what happens now. Okay, so again Ather logs in, LB sends him to server 3. Server 3 tells Redis that it will subscribe to a user Ather channel now. So now this approach is quite similar to what we understood for Kafka as well, which for Apache Kafka 1. Here also we will be having server 3 where it will try to have, and every user will have a channel first of all, like we had in Kafka where Ather had user Ather as a topic, Bob had a user underscore Bob as a topic. Here also Ather will have a user Ather channel. Okay, now whenever Ather logs in, server 3 subscribes to that user Ather channel over there. Okay, and internally in Redis we have a map where we have the channel against the list of the subscribers. So here if you see that user Ather was the channel name, and we have the list of the ones who are actually subscribing to it, the subscribers of that channel. So here in this case the IP of server 3 would be there as a subscriber because Ather is connected to server 3. Now again Bob sends a hi Ather message, and he is on server 1. Firstly, the server writes the message to DynamoDB, which is like the message plus inbox table whole flow, which we discussed in the functional requirement. Okay. Then server one sends a command to Redis that it will publish in user author channel a message underscore 001, which is the ID which we would have got after publishing or after persisting or storing the data to the table. Okay. So once we have got this ID, we would have published into user author, and then Redis looks at the map which we just created. Okay, so this was a map which we had. Okay, so in this map we would have multiple servers listening to it, but let's say in our case only server 3 was connected. So it sees server 3 as subscribed it, and which has subscribed the user author channel. Redis pushes the payload to server 3. Now with the list, in that list whatever the consumers are there will go to that consumers one by one and publish that message, send that message to, or message or the payload through that particular servers whose IP is written in this particular map. Okay, so now server 3 receives the payload and immediately sends it down the WebSocket to author's phone. So this is what the overall approach via Redis PubSub is. So here we have zero persistence overhead with decoupling and horizontal scaling as well. And this is how our whole high level diagram of our system would look like, where we would have Redis PubSub which will be used for like all message sharing and all, chat server where users are connected via WebSocket connection, and we have a DB where we'll be storing everything. Okay, so why this is the industry standard? Because we have achieved the decoupling where server 1 server 3 never even talk to each other directly. Redis handles the handshake. And about talking about speed, Redis PubSub is incredibly lightweight. We are talking about microsecond delivery times over here. And when we talk about scale, we can add 5,000 or more servers tomorrow, and as long as they can talk to the Redis cluster, our messaging logic never has to change. And this is the one thing which will always help us, and this is the final approach, I would say, and this is what the final diagram which has evolved from the approach 1 to approach 4 what we have just discussed. So okay, now let's look at the second non-functional requirement and the second thing in our deep dives. And for that, think about your own daily routine. You start a chat on your phone while commuting, then you switch to your laptop at work and maybe an iPad in the evening. So, as an engineer, this presents a massive synchronization challenge. If I send a message to author, which device should ring? And the answer is all of them. To handle this with minimal changes to our current architecture, we need to stop thinking about users as our final destination and start thinking about clients. So clients is the essential thing over here instead of user. So user might have multiple clients now. So here how we are going to implement this is a very clear and additive approach. So I'll just discuss about that approach now. So here we need to introduce a new table that maps a user ID to multiple clients, whether it's your Chrome browser, your Android app, or your desktop client. Each of them gets a unique ID and its own entry. Now when the server looks up at as now when the server looks up who is in the chat, it doesn't stop at the participant ID. It does a secondary jump to find every active client associated with that user. Okay, so now that this is the most important change, where in our inbox table it is no longer per user, it is per client now. So if author has 3 devices, the system creates 3 rows in the inbox. This ensures that if phone is offline but laptop is online, the laptop gets the message immediately while the phone entry stays in the queue in the inbox table. So this is how we introduce just one table and just change the inbox table, and we are able to solve this particular thing where we have multiple clients for a single users. Now if you trace the delivery of this particular thing, how it would be. So when a message is sent, the chat server identifies all target clients. Okay, so it then uses Redis PubSub model to publish each specific specific client channel basically. So if client A is on server 1 and client B is on server 5, the system handles it effortlessly. Each server receives a publish command, checks its own local memory for a specific client WebSocket, and pushes the message. So when you now, as I said that Alice and Bob were the 2 cases, here we would have clients of Alice and Bob. Now Alice would have 3 to 4 clients, Bob would have also 3 to 4 clients now, and that is how we are maintaining the inbox table now. So when you read the message on your laptop, the laptop sends back an acknowledgement. Let's say the server then marks the message as read across all other clients if it has been acknowledged by all clients. And this is how WhatsApp keeps your unread count perfectly synced across every screen you own. So by making the inbox client specific, we have solved the sync problem with almost zero impact on our latency. It is a trivial change in terms of code, but a massive win for a user experience. And that is how we have actually solved the problem by just adding this clients table, as you can see over here. And everything now, earlier, if you would have seen, in this was the high level design earlier also, which we had. Okay, now it's just that we have added this clients table and made a change in the inbox table. Where we had recipient ID earlier, now we have a recipient client ID with us, and that is mapped to the clients table now. And this is how we solve this problem. Okay, so now let's see the third deep dive, and which is about what happens if a WebSocket connection fails. This is essentially how are we solving the fault tolerance. Okay, so the when we have this kind of massive global network, there is a ugly reality as well, that connections fail all the time. And a user, if let's say a user enters an elevator, their Wi-Fi switches to 5G, or a server simply crashes. So if a WebSocket connection hangs, how does the server know the user is gone? We don't want to waste resources sending messages into a black hole. To solve this, we use a heartbeat mechanism. Every few seconds, the chat server sends a tiny ping message over a socket. The client must respond with a pong within a strict window, let's say 5 or 10 seconds. So if that pong doesn't arrive, the server immediately closes the connection, updates our Redis registry to offline, and starts rerouting all future messages to the inbox table. We keep our system clean and resource optimized in this way. So if you would have also seen the previous part of this particular video only, where I showed you the Slack network interface, Slack network tab. And if you see over there, when we established a WebSocket connection, there you would have seen that there were continuously ping pong messages shared between the server and the client, which we saw in our network tab. Every time server send a ping, our client used to send a pong within some time frame. So if it was not possible, if pong was not sent, then the WebSocket connection was re-established, and we would have seen the mechanism once again. Now let's talk about, now that we have discussed the third deep dive, let's talk about the fourth deep dive, which is about what happens if Redis fails to deliver a message. Okay, so if a message is published to a channel just as like the server is restarting, this is where we might lose a message in that tiny gap, and the user would never know they missed it. So to make our system 100% bulletproof, we introduce sequence numbers. So these sequence numbers uh, are like used to when we maintain a single incremental counter in our database for every user. Every time a new message is generated for a thirf, the counter ticks up like 1, 2, 3, or like so on. And now remember those heartbeat pings which we just talked about. We don't just send a ping, we also include the current sequence number the server has for the user. This you would have also seen in our Slack's network tab. If phone sees a ping saying, let's say, sequence 105, but the last message his phone received was sequence 102, the client instantly realizes that, wait, I have missed three messages over there. And that is how, so if somehow client's local sequence number is behind the servers, we ask for a sync, and this way we can regain the lost messages if any. And this is how actually we solve the whole issue, where if our client misses some or the other message because of network failure or any kind of intermittent issue, we would be solving it using sequence numbers. So I would strongly urge you guys to go in any kind of chat system, try to see its network tab, try to see what is happening within the WebSocket connections. As I've already shown you Slack's network tab, you can also go in Slack's network tab, see in the WebSocket connection what exactly the things are happening, and this is how you will be in sync with what we have discussed in this whole video. And this is how we complete the whole chat system design. And if you mention all the kinds of scenarios in the interviews, I'm sure you'll be able to crack it.